and they stop your client and they hand him over to ICE, essentially he's being held in detention, in ICE detention. And they just keep holding him and nobody's checking on this and nobody's aware that all these people are just languishing in there. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, that's what we're seeing in a lot of these cases. And I've seen it firsthand where, those guys have been sitting in there for a week to 2 weeks with nothing. They haven't had any notice to appear issued to them. It's obviously, there are Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment violations going on.
All right, Mo, you're back on Borderland Talk, and I think you and we've talked about like, oh, for those that don't know, let me introduce you. Mo is an immigration attorney in Tucson, Arizona. He's a buddy of mine, a really good friend, and I have learned a lot from him and his law practice and the things that he sees. I certainly never saw in the U.S. Border Patrol. So, I think the main thing I want to ask you, Mo, is just to get this rolling, is like, how have things changed? Have things changed since the mass deportation for you and your clients that you are trying to provide immigration counseling for through their ICE appointments and so forth?
It's definitely changed to there's been multiple ways that it's changed. I'll give you kind of a rundown of those. The first thing is, historically, if somebody had to check in with ICE, we'd send them in for their check-in. They'd go get checked in, they'd leave, and all was fine. Now everyone's afraid to check in with ICE. So, and understandably so. So, I had not gone to any check ins with clients of mine for years. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the last few weeks, I've gone a few times. And it's quite an experience because the ICE office, I'm based in Tucson, which is all over the news media these days, thanks to the Nancy Guthrie abduction.
Well,
But the
yeah,
ICE office
true.
it used to be a place, it was part of the USCIS office. They had a combined office and
Mm-hmm.
then they separated the two, which was actually good for a lot of our clients because having them in the same building had a chilling effect on people, knowing that there were ICE agents lurking in the back. Not that they couldn't be lurking at the new office, but at least it's, separated now.
Right.
So that happened about, I'd say maybe 12 or 13 years ago. Then in probably about 3 years ago, the ICE office put up, we used to just drive up to the door and we would walk in with our clients and check in with them, or they would just go in. Then they put this entire like wall barrier around the office. And so now when you need to go there to check in, you have to walk up to this gate. It's like a fortress, and they have a phone number you call, and you get on the phone with an agent, and then they send a guy out to talk to you outside. So it's just bizarre. Like there's like when I went there earlier this week, there were 30 people just lingering
Standing
outside of
around.
this office. It was just
I
very odd.
I'm laughing. I imagine the camera was on you as you were talking, but I was just, what Mo was seeing was me shaking my head and looking down at my desk and just, so what this is this criminalization of the immigrant, I
Yes.
mean, ICE is normally helping people get through the system, and so there's a different part of ICE that people have to do their check-ins and stuff in between their court hearings and stuff. And like Mo's saying, it used to be that, yeah, it's a pain in the ass and all this other stuff, but people went and they didn't really feel the need to bring their their legal counsel with them. But then as so that putting up those border, literally putting up a wall around themselves. God, how many walls are these people going to build?
There's lots of walls.
There's lots of
And
walls. Yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
that's significant. And is it USCIS now, which are the people that help people like refugees and stuff like that, are now actually taking more of a law enforcement face,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
That's
gonna be
terrible.
called deportation officers or something. Like they've changed the title to make it sound much more, enforcement minded and intimidating.
We
So
already have
that's
deportation officers in ERO, in
yeah.
ICRO.
What do they call? Oh, they're I think they're American defenders or something. They have some
Oh my
sort of,
God.
it's like they're gonna defend the Homeland Defender
Oh,
officers.
for God's
I
sakes.
think that's what they called it. So it's very bizarre
Jawohl.
to, I know. It's very strange when you walk up to the gate there, because the gate still has a sign about coronavirus.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know. I think I sent you the photo of it, that it was so like all worn out and outdated. And I just kept thinking, like, with all the money that they're putting into investing in buildings, maybe, or detention centers, maybe they could just, put a new sign up. Yeah, it says, due to coronavirus, we are canceling check-ins. So if somebody walks up to the ICE office and that's still on the gate,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of misleading, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's so
Mhm.
bizarre. So that's one thing that's really stuck out to me, is the amount of people just kind of lingering outside. And then these officers come out and they ask, what's your name? What's your name? And they can't remember. Then they come back and ask again. And
Mhm.
they look like they just rolled out of bed sometimes, it's
And probably hungover and
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
between that and then going, I think the bigger difference that we're really seeing significantly are people who traditionally would not have been detained and arrested, who are being held in an unlawful manner. And it's forcing lawyers to file habeas petitions at a extremely high rate. And I mean, I had a guy a week ago that they held for 51 days. They didn't charge him with anything. He was a refugee from Venezuela. He was admitted under the Refugee Assistance Program, and this poor guy
So
got
he's
pulled.
already jumped through a ton of hoops just to get
Yeah,
that
it's not easy to
designation.
become a refugee.
Yeah.
So this poor guy, it's probably a wrong place, wrong time scenario, was making a delivery down in Nogales,
Mhm.
which is near the border. And Border Patrol pulls him over and question him. And then the next thing he knows, he's being handed over to ICE, and they took his he claims they took his phone away, because obviously he's not allowed to keep the phone.
Right.
His vehicle got impounded,
Mhm.
and his IDs were in the vehicle,
Mm.
and his mom was here with him. She came here as a refugee as well. She was scrambling to try to find some help. Finally, got someone from the International Rescue Committee to talk to her about it. But this was like a month and probably maybe about 5 weeks later.
Mhm.
And so they reached out to me, and I was like, yeah, get me on a call with her so we can, talk about it. I want to hear what happened.
Mhm.
And I searched him on the immigration court system and found no evidence that he had had any hearings in front of a judge. I was like, well,
Mhm.
what the hell's going on here?
Mhm.
So I told the woman, I mean, she was despondent. She's like, my son's been sitting in the detention center for 50 days, and they are not giving him proper medical treatment. They allege that he asked for some pain medicine for his shoulder, and then when he asked for it, they put him in the hole.
Solitary, yeah.
Sounds par for the course.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I emailed this one of the supervisors at ICE and said, "Hey, we're gonna prepare a lawsuit to get him released, and potentially a federal torts claim act and lawsuit." And 2 hours later, this was this was a week ago on Thursday, which would have been February the 5th. Um, on let's see, about 2 hours later, I got a call from an ICE officer. He's like, "Yeah, we're going to release your client tomorrow morning," and I was like, "Wow!" Like the power of
It's
just
the
having a
yeah.
lawyer to threaten them.
And so then you think about how many people don't have the
Don't
ability
have
to
that.
have Mo Goldman call up, or
And all I did was email them. It
or
was a one
email, yeah.
paragraph email. Like,
Yeah, they're just getting away with whatever they can get
it's
away with.
insane. So
Mm.
they released the guy, and I say, "Hey, where's his cell phone?" Like,
Mm.
well, where do you think the cell phone is?
In the trash. Or in their
Probably.
intelligence. They
Well,
probably
so
sucked everything out for intelligence and then threw it in the trash.
so the ICE officer gets back to me and says, "Well, we usually have phones confiscated when the person admits to human smuggling." And I was like, "Wait,
What?
where is there anything in this fact pattern that my client was involved in human smuggling? And if he was, why were you guys so hot to trot to get rid of him after I?"
If he's a smuggler. I mean, seriously, if you think
Yeah.
he's a smuggler, you wouldn't think it.
No.
That's a
And
criminal offense.
wouldn't you have handed the case over to the U.S., attorney's office?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I, he goes, we ICE doesn't have his cell phone. I'm like, oh, okay. Who does? He goes, probably Border Patrol. So I said, all right, well, uh, which office should I call? So they said, call the 3 Points office. So I call up
Mm-hmm.
3 Points, and I get this guy, and he's like, yeah, we
I
have no
don't know.
record of anything. So he goes, call the Tucson sector office. I'm
It's
like,
already been sold on TikTok.
yeah. So I call the Tucson sector office, and literally right before I finally got a call back this morning, and right before I got on with you, I called the lady over there, and she's like, "Yeah, we have no record of this guy." She's like, "Call Nogales," and I'm like, "You guys are crazy! Like, what?"
This is normal, though.
I
I
know
mean, this is just, I mean, I don't know if it's normal for ICE. I can't say that. But I recognize it as just normal immigration behavior.
it is. It's
The
called
stealing
find
of the
the.
property, or just
Yeah.
losing the property, or throwing it away and not giving a shit because nothing ever happens to them.
And the
What is your
saddest part,
client gonna do?
they have no legal recourse. Like, what are you going to do? Sue the government so you can get your cell phone back?
Yeah, it's just not
Um,
gonna happen.
yeah. I mean, it takes me back to about 15 years ago. I had this young lady who got so wild. She was coming back to Arizona, or actually, I think she was leaving Arizona to go to a Christian it was some sort of retreat.
Hmm.
She was going to some religious retreat. Real sweet young woman, and she was Iranian and didn't have. She wasn't documented. I think she was just brought here by her parents, like kind of like a dreamer type of
Hmm.
scenario. So at the time, it was like pretty hyper enforcement in Arizona. There were some border patrol that were hanging out at the TSA. check in, and they arrested her there, and she had this necklace, and she told me that the necklace was super sentimental, but they took
Mhm.
it from her when they detained her. And
Mhm.
I'll never forget, how sad she was when they told me they didn't have it and probably trashed it or something. And it was heartbreaking because you never know what is going to be of sentimental value to somebody, you know?
Yeah, I remember in the first Trump administration, I was getting pictures of my friends in Texas along in the Rio Grande Valley area. They go out to the river and they would find big piles of trash from where the Border Patrol agents are arresting the migrants as they track them down. And they're showing me their immigration documents, their passports and all this, and they just throw it out there so then they don't have it. And that makes life absolutely miserable because you need those documents, especially if you're going to seek asylum. And one of them was a file of a little girl who was seeking asylum because she had a broken back and already had surgery for it.
Mhm.
So you can see the rods and everything from x-rays in her back, and they just left the x-rays and all her medical files out there and just didn't even care. So this is pretty standard. It's like they spend so much time trying to think of ways that they can fuck with people
Yeah.
and absolutely make their lives miserable, make their attorneys have to work harder, so then that racks up their charges, which or they have to pro bono a lot of their work, which I'm telling you right now, you guys, these immigration attorneys are not making the money you think that they're making. Um, in
No
criminal
joke.
law, and I understand you're not a criminal attorney, but you are a very good attorney, so I'm going to ask you this, and it's a standard answer. I know you know the answer. If you are arrested by a police officer and held in custody for a criminal charge, is there a limit of time before you have to see a judge, Mo?
Yes, there is. And like for example, or had to have charges, brought against the person.
Mm-hmm.
I
But a
mean, we just saw
preliminary
that happen
hearing.
with the guy who got detained on the Nancy Guthrie case. He was not under arrest, but he was a
Mm-hmm.
person of interest that they had detained. And my understanding was that they could only hold him for 2 hours.
Oh, really? Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I had read on that. And I mean, you can't just hold the person indefinitely. And that's what they were going to do with this guy.
Well, and so that's when you say so like ICE and Border Patrol, they would say, well, the reason why you don't have that limited immigration is because it's civil law and there is no punishment. And it's like, but you're holding them. That is the
Mhm.
punishment. You're punishing them before we even know anything. And so when you're saying that you're having to file a lot of habeas petitions, what that means is a habeas. Let me explain to people who don't know what a habeas is, Mo.
Asking the government to release the body or to not move the body. It involves obviously the person, the individual. And so when the government is either going to hold somebody unlawfully when they shouldn't be holding them, you can do a habeas petition on that basis. Or you could do a habeas petition, for example, if somebody is going to be transferred, moved out of the jurisdiction. And that we're seeing that in cases where the government's trying to move people into either other jurisdictions to try to prep them to be deported, or if
Hmm.
they're planning to deport the person, potentially in some cases to a third country where they have no connection. That's where you file these petitions in the federal district court.
So, is there a law when an immigration officer arrests you for what is an immigration violation versus a criminal violation? Is there not a law as to how long they can detain you before they at least charge you with something or bring you before a judge?
So the way it's worked, well, for example, like let's say somebody is held in a criminal jail, a county jail, or some
Hmm.
place like that, and ICE puts a detainer on the person.
Hmm.
ICE then has 72 hours to get that person and take them into custody.
Hmm.
In the case of a it's called a notice to appear, which is the charging document that gets filed with an immigration court. The NTA has to, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'm not sure if there is a specific amount of time, but I'm just not sure off the top of my head. I mean, I have seen cases recently, and I think a lot of this is because they're they've over expanded their detention capacity while they don't have enough people on the ground, or they just don't have competent people on the ground to do the next step. So it's like, okay, let's just get these people, put them in detention, and then we'll eventually, issue a notice to appear and serve it on them. And I've noticed that that has become slow. Like, I've had people who've been in detention for a week to 2 weeks, and there's been nothing filed. And the only way
So,
we can trigger it is
wow,
usually to file a bond hearing.
that's crazy, Mo. I mean,
Yeah.
we used to issue notices to appear from Border Patrol for people who were other than Mexican. We call them OTMs or OTMs. And that's because back in the day they were required to see a judge. We couldn't just throw them back in Mexico. And I want to say back then they had 30 days to present themselves to the immigration court where they were going. So somebody, if I arrested somebody and they came back with no record and I processed them to have a hearing before an immigration judge, I would give them a notice to appear, and take down the information of where they are going and photocopy all their documents and stuff. Let's say they're going to go to Louisiana. So I say, okay, and I find the nearest immigration office there and say, you have to, it says there on the NTA, I want to say it was 30 days. You have 30 days to report, and then they will set up a hearing for you and you'll see a judge. That was before we wanted to keep people in custody. So under what we're seeing now, essentially what they're saying is, because this let's say border patrol stops somebody and they stop your client and they hand him over to ICE, essentially he's being held in detention, in ICE detention, and they just keep holding him and nobody's checking on this and nobody's aware that all these people are just languishing in there. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, that's what we're seeing in a lot of these cases. And I've seen it firsthand where, those guys have been sitting in there for a week to 2 weeks with nothing. They haven't had any notice to appear issued to them. It's obviously, there are Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment violations going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, and just to clarify, it's 48 hours that a law enforcement agency can hold somebody subject to an ICE detainer.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's with the 287G agreements, where there's
Mm-hmm.
an agreement between the local police, or state police agencies holding those individuals for the federal government to come and pick them up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's different from a notice to appear. The
Right.
notice to appear is that official, document that commences the removal proceedings, the deportation proceedings. And so, yeah, I mean, there are people who I just read another story from a lawyer that said that she, was able to find a guy who had been sitting waiting for 40 days without any anything being issued or processed. And, is this going on because they want to collectively punish people and they know they can get away with it? That is one theory. And the other is that they're just very sloppy. And right now they have way too much on their plate. And the government under Trump has bit off more than they can chew. And so what we're seeing is these habeas lawsuits are starting to result in decisions in favor, a lot of them, depending on the jurisdiction. A lot of the federal court judges are siding with these petitioners, and ultimately the government is having to pay out EJA fees, which is Equal Access to Justice Act. Those are basically attorney fees that the government's going to have to pay on these cases, and it's going to cost a pretty penny to the feds.
because they held them longer than they should have.
Well, and because the main reason why you get EJA fees is if you get a decision granting in your favor
I see.
on a case. So, like, for example, we did a habeas petition and it appeared that we were going to be successful based
Mhm.
off of our arguments. And then all of a sudden, our client was getting released. And we were like, I wonder if they're doing that because they know they're going to lose and we're going to ask for EJA fees and they're trying to, get in front of this.
That's
And
interesting.
it is. It really is. I mean, I think EJA fees in some cases are a good equalizer to the government because
Mm.
they don't want to have, that sort of payment incurred. And I think that's one of the ways that you can, get the government to succumb to your arguments and be submissive in a sense. Um, but yeah, so I think uh, I am not aware that they have, and maybe there is a time frame that they've got to charge someone. I just haven't. I mean, I think if it's a mandatory, there's some issues right now with the way the law is being read and construed as far as people who entered without
Mhm.
inspection. And right now, the government is interpreting it under the current policy and a Board of Immigration appeals case that people who entered without inspection are not bond eligible.
And that's typically only for people who were recently crossed, right? Is that the
Um,
issue?
well, not being subject to mandatory detention,
Mhm.
which is detention without a right to a bond hearing,
Mhm.
has been traditionally for people who were paroled into the US who are considered arriving aliens.
Uh-huh.
Or sometimes it's because a person has a certain criminal record that subjects them to mandatory. But most of the other individuals, including people who entered without inspection, are not subject to mandatory. But that is the big issue right now that's going up through the courts. Like the Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas, just found that they can detain and hold people under that set of facts.
Well, that explains then why they sudden buying of all these giant warehouses then. So they want the ability to be able to still further criminalizing the immigrant, whether they're simply just out of status or which happens for a variety of reasons, certainly non-criminal reasons, and then which and should be handled in an office with some paperwork and maybe a fine is how it should be handled. But so they're criminalizing everybody, and then on top of it, if you were never inspected when you came in, and so let's say your parents brought you here 20, 30 years ago, or you did cross illegally and were not inspected,
Mhm.
then they're using that as a reason to then hold you and not allow a bond. Wow.
Yeah. And so, and because it's civil in the immigration context, that's where I think there's a lot of frustration as far as people saying, well, in criminal court, you get all these like protections, so you get the right to have a lawyer appointed to you. You have a right to have a speedy hearing and trial. Those
Mm.
sorts of protections are not available in a civil immigration context. And so there now what we're seeing is, the MAGA population are out there saying, well, these are a bunch of criminals and we need to, deal with this as if they're criminals, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're facing civil charges, and unfortunately, if you want to make them criminals, then pay for their legal defense. I mean, I think that people who claim that they're all a bunch of criminals have to understand that if you're going to call people criminals, which of course they're not, and they're not being charged criminally, then there is a whole slew of other protections that come with that from a constitutional perspective.
Yeah, but
I
the
know I'm speaking a
Constitution is
little
kind of.
too, it's
No,
kind
I
of
know,
like
and
maybe,
and that's what gets me too, is because I mean I don't have a law degree like you do, and I've never practiced immigration law, and it's like people are like, well, they don't deserve to have a lawyer because it's not criminal, and
yeah.
deportation isn't a punishment to send somebody back to their own country. So these are all just civil suits, and I'm like, but some of these countries that you're sending these people to are, I mean, they're literally going to die, and the thought that, well, we could just hold people indefinitely in a facility that is pretty much a prison, it is a prison. And from what I
Yeah.
understand, a lot of them are worse than a prison. That is punishment. You just, it cannot be in the United States of America with a constitution that we have that says all persons get due process, not just citizens get due process. I mean, it just cannot be that we have this separate, obviously, immigration justice system, which is separate from the criminal division, but we're going to allow them to hold you indefinitely.
you
And
know
I mean, it
But
just doesn't
well,
make any
I
sense.
want to read this to you because I just pulled it up. I thought this was really quite
Okay.
telling. This is a thread from 2007 that's on one of my legal the Immigration Lawyers Association website. We have a message
Hmm.
center, and somebody asked, how long does it take on average before someone who's been detained to see an immigration judge? This was a permanent resident incarcerated in Bergen County, New Jersey.
Okay.
This is July 2007. Um, no one from ICE had visited him. It looks like in at least several days. So this other lawyer responds, in Detroit, it can take anywhere from not quick enough to forever for ICE to file the notice to appear in the court to schedule a hearing. So there you go. This has been a long-standing problem where they just, in some cases don't do it, aren't motivated to do it, and people languish.
And if you complain, and I know from having so many conversations from people who are immigrants, it's like the fear to complain of complaining. It's like the women who get sexually assaulted in border patrol custody. They don't want to complain because they are afraid it's going to affect their asylum case. And
Mhm.
so everybody just takes it and just deals with it. And that's why these people are not afraid of accountability when you see them in your streets in Minneapolis. I mean, it's like this is how immigration agents are used to behaving. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was go to an actual immigration court because I've never been. I know a lot of people think, well, you were an agent for 6 years, or even if you were an agent for 20 years, most of us have never gone to immigration court because everything that we write down, the judges just assume is true. And so now you see why agents have been getting away with lying for decades and decades down here, whether it's
Mm.
immigration court or criminal court, and nobody calls us out on it.
You can challenge that, but again, you've got to have representation to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is when they, assuming things procedurally are done correctly, a notice to appear will have charges on there known as allegations. And then the presumption is that it is true unless the person can disprove it, or you can ask for a prove up, a hearing for that to be demonstrated to the court. um, a lot of times, I mean, in immigration, we don't have to go into the whole prove up hearing because, you'll have somebody who's been here without authorization and the facts are pretty, you know,
Yeah.
pretty much consistent. But the other issue is if you have like a prove up hearing, you're pushing the case out further. And if they're in detention, you may want to, and they may not be able to get out of detention for some reason, you might want to move the case along. So you have to kind of weigh your options on that.
That makes sense.
And so it is a situation though where the burden of proof in immigration in most cases falls squarely on the detainee, the person in front of the judge.
I I either saw or was writing about or used it as an example or something. This one young woman, United States citizen, Latina, was held, and I think she was held for over 50 days or something like that, and at least a
Mhm.
month. Even though her attorney had given the birth certificate and everything that she was born here in the United States and all this other stuff. So, I mean, this is even happening to United States citizens, and this young woman, even had an attorney, and they still held her for all that time. I mean, if there's not a rule that says that you have to do something with them or charge them or take them before a judge, then basically there's zero accountability.
I mean, look at Mahmoud Khalil. That guy had an army of lawyers helping him out on his case, and he was
Hmm.
still held for months. Obviously he
So
was
think about
a
all the people that don't have that. Yeah.
yeah, there's so many that just don't have representation. And obviously it becomes a matter of numbers as well. If they're going to arrest and detain millions of people and there's only, let's just say, 10,000 lawyers who are specialists in immigration law that
Right.
do this type of work, how is that even feasible at the end of the day, where you get lawyers who are competent enough? Like, I was contacted yesterday by a lawyer who works for one of those big law firms out of Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
that do, corporate law, that sort of work, litigation, but they don't know immigration. And
Right.
they have a case in front of them trying to figure out, they want to do it pro bono, but they don't even know where to start. And
Yeah.
and that's part of the frustration, is that you can educate people on how this process works, but I think what people have to understand is you could be doing this for 50 years, like my buddy Chuck Cook, who's like 1,000 years old now. I don't know if you know Chuck, but he's a great
I
lawyer. I
don't
just
know.
like to give him a hard time. He's not that old, but if you're a
I
guy
hope
like
not.
him who's been doing it forever, honestly, he everything he knows and everything
Hmm.
he's done can work, except right now it doesn't. It's almost like the law doesn't even matter, you know what I mean? And they're just
Yeah.
doing whatever they want. And like yesterday I was at an event where we were basically being re-administered our oath to the courts and to the rule of law. And all I could think about through this whole event was, what rule of law? You know?
Do you have to do that every year?
No, it was more of a kind of performative thing. I
Oh,
think
okay. Because I
in
was
the
about to say
last,
we never did that in the Border Patrol.
no,
So.
they started doing that. They did it last year in May. And I think it was kind of the reaction to the whole no kings thing. Like, we have a
Mm.
constitution and it's being trampled on. And it was interesting because the Arizona State Bar decided, I think it was the state bar, decided to do an event yesterday. And there was a lot of lawyers present at this event. But while that's going on, I'm texting with a group of people we're trying to get a woman out of detention who's been unlawfully held there for about 2 weeks. And all I could think of was, this is all just a joke. Like, what rule of law?
Okay. So now that we know how you feel about where the system is and where it's going, I had asked you this privately if you would be okay with it. And if you're not, if you've changed your mind, that's fine too. But to maybe compare what you're seeing now, or do you have any thoughts about what we're seeing now in the United States when we compare it to your grandmother who
Yeah.
survived the Holocaust? And you've written a book about that. What's the name of your book again?
It's called The Last Survivor:
I
Lessons
should have
from the
had that.
Past and the
Yeah.
Dying Dream of Freedom. Very wordy. Like, I'm sure if I had an actual, like, editor and publisher, they'd probably be like,
Yeah, they
that
might have
is
helped
too
you with
long of
that.
a title. But yeah, I mean, this is something I talk about a lot, which and I talked about it this morning on a radio show as well, about the comparisons. And the the thing that makes me feel like we are living in a time that could be in some ways compared to the Nazi Germany times is that they would hold people without any sort of hearing. They
Mm.
would take their items away. I remember going over and visiting Auschwitz. And, when I went there in 1994, it was a museum, and it was pretty incredible experience to go and see what they had there. But they had all these items from people, whether they were toothbrushes or people's personal belongings, just piled
Eyeglasses,
up.
their teeth.
Their teeth, but piled up in the
Yeah.
middle of these barracks. And
Yeah.
you're looking at it going, holy crap, like, this is astounding. And when you look at what we're doing now, and the fact that we are taking people's items away, and that we're seeing agents just swoop in and grab people and put them in detention and hold them for no good reason except to collectively punish a population of people that are not here to harm our country. It How can you not compare it? In my opinion, I feel like the comparisons are quite apropos. And it's very sad to see. And
That's
what
go ahead.
makes me feel even worse is that we have people who should know better and who should be speaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very apropos. Also, when you think about it, it was our immigration services in the 20s that inspired Nazi Germany. The Zyklon B gas was
Mhm.
originally used to delouse immigrants who were coming across the border to work until they protested. And Hitler himself had said that he took great inspiration from the U.S. Border Patrol and the Immigration Service and how they treated people, the people of color over here in the United States. So, I mean, I know people get upset about it and everything, and it's hard not to make the comparison though, because that system learned from us. It is our system just as much as this system is our system.
Here's the
Um,
thing. People
Go
get
ahead.
upset because it's not the Jewish population as like the whole population. But if we look back at the Nazi Germany, comparison, or the Nazis in general, they were going after people for political reasons. They were detaining people because they were a gay or lesbian person. They had
Transgender.
different
Yep.
bases to do it. And when you see that they are targeting specific individuals, and what we're seeing a lot of right now are Venezuelans, they're
Hmm.
going after these Venezuelan people. Um, and they are people who have given all their information to the federal government, who have maybe been already reporting, who have a case pending, or like I said, who even are refugees, and to just go and arrest people with no good basis except that you want to put them in detention because you need to reach certain quotas
Yeah.
is, I mean, how is that not comparable to what the Nazis were doing?
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know.
had some. I was interviewed once. I think it was John Carlos Frey on his podcast, The Raid. He was like, he's trained in corporate media and stuff, and I was saying, I mean, this is a rogue agency. The all the agencies are rogue, and they are literally, um, you know, behaving like the Nazis did. And he says, "Do you understand what you're saying?" And I said, "I do understand what I'm saying. Did the Nazis not grab people out of their homes? Did they not say that they could not work in certain areas? We've been doing that for God knows how many years. And I said that's what we're doing. We're ripping people out of their cars. Now people are hiding in homes, trying to survive through this kind of thing. And it's so I think it's hard for a lot of say white Americans who tend not to try and think of these things or try and deal with these things. But I think it confuses a lot of people when they see the Latino agents doing this too,
Mhm.
because they're obviously racially profiling, and they do that. But there's a whole lot of ways to overcome that in the agency. But I think the biggest one that got me was watching a Latino agent who had a very thick accent. And I don't even know where he was from. I don't think he was Mexican. He could have been, but it didn't sound like a Mexican accent. And the man that he was talking to was Latino and had a very thick accent, even though he was a U.S. citizen. And he says, "Why are you stopping me?" Whatever his accent was. And he said, "Well, because of your accent." And he goes, "Dude, you have an accent too." And the guy just shook it off like, "Yeah, but I got the uniform." You know,
Mhm.
and that's that seeking out of privilege, and there were in fact Jewish people who were turning in their Jewish neighbors and doing
Yeah.
things like that. There are always those types of people. um
And when you don't have accountability for bad acts, then that's, that's where you're gonna end up in heading down that same pathway. So there's no
yeah,
accountability for what those officers were doing over in the 30s and 40s.
yeah.
And right now, I mean,
No, we
look at
brought them
what
here
they,
and gave them jobs.
yeah,
I mean, I grew up
exactly.
in Huntsville, Alabama, Space and Rocket Center. I mean, that's our civic center was named after Warner von Braun. All these Nazis that came over during the day, and we gave them jobs, and they designed our missile programs and stuff like that, and their space
Yeah.
programs. So, yeah,
And
there
I
was
mean,
no accountability.
none. And so, I mean, I had a case that happened, and you mentioned people living in fear. I mean, this woman, just what a wonderful woman. Like she's endeared herself to so many people in Tucson in our community. And she, back about I'd say about a year after she arrived in the United States. She came here in 2023. She went up on a stage and did a storytelling event where they had different refugee, asylee people, applicants, or people who received it, speaking about their story, which I thought was very courageous considering the times we're living in.
Right.
And they had a guy from Burundi, they had a woman from the Ukraine, they had this Venezuelan lady, and then a handful others. They had a Somali woman, and then this poor woman started to feel fear that she was being followed. So it was a few weeks ago.
Mm.
um, Now, is that fear justified? I'd say so, because all you hear about is, people are getting plucked off the streets. She has a work permit. She entered through CBP One app,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
the app that's now CBP Home. But it's an app that basically you register with so that you can have your credible fear interview and follow the right pathway under the law. And she got a work permit. She applied for asylum. Everything's on the up and up.
Hmm.
Then she started feeling very insecure with what was happening. So she wouldn't leave her home for about a week. She stayed home. And one day she had to go out to the bank. She had to leave. And as she was at the bank, she got swarmed by ICE agents.
Fuck.
And
Man.
again, if she had not been like connected in the community to have people say, wait, this is wrong, we got to stop this,
Right.
and then to know to reach out to a lawyer, myself, to try to help her and jump to action. And like you said, we're not becoming gazillionaires doing it. It was pro bono, but it was
Hmm.
the right thing to do for her and for this community, and to pay her back for her courageousness of being able to tell her story. I find that to be like some of the, the most important things, is that people need to hear from the people who are being subjected to this bullshit. And then we filed a habeas, and about 9 days later, the U.S. Attorney's Office informed us that she was going to have her case dismissed in immigration court and they were going to release her.
Wow.
So great. It's a wonderful result. But what I
But
told
what's
the
going to
judge.
prevent ICE from swarming her next time she goes to
Exactly.
the
And
bank?
you know what I told the judge? Because we had a hearing on it, and the ICE offered to dismiss the proceedings. And I didn't want to just agree without getting, a few words
Hmm.
on the record about what has happened here. And
Right.
I said to them, I said, this is a woman who fled the Maduro regime because she was targeted, detained, and tortured by them, due to certain facts, that made her a target. And she comes to the United States seeking safety and security. And guess what we did? We did the exact same fucking thing to this woman.
Yeah.
And we've now doubly traumatized her.
Yeah.
And is she going to feel safe anywhere outside of detention?
No.
And
Yeah.
so I told the judge, I said, this administration keeps touting how they're targeting the worst of the worst. Well,
Mm.
this woman, she was the best of the best. And we are ruining people's lives just to meet quotas, just to be cruel.
And I think the thing too that we're not even paying attention to is, and always want to ask you and end on this, is how are you doing? Because there's a lot of secondary trauma involved in all of this. I called you
I'm
this morning,
doing
I
all
texted you
right.
this morning,
I
and I
mean,
was like, I don't want to do it today because I'm tired of
well,
talking about this stuff. But
when you texted me, I was at the gym.
oh,
So
well, that's good.
it's healthy to go there. and I have lots of cuddle time with my dog.
Yes, me too.
And I mean, I- my everyone has ways to deal with stuff in different, and I've talked to you about this. I under the first Trump administration, I had a nervous breakdown, and I wound up taking anti-anxiety meds, and
Mhm.
I'm on a low dose, but it's been really good for me. Um, and I get some, therapy, and I talk to a psychologist on
Mhm.
a semi-regular basis. And, you can only do the best you can. And so I think that everyone's mental health is something they have to take care of. I feel very blessed that I have the ability in the medical care to help me. And and I feel that I'm also a person that needs to understand my privilege, that I am privileged to the
Yeah.
extent where I do feel like I can say what's on my mind, even though maybe someday I might get targeted for it. But, it's not, I'm not going to be deterred. Neither should the mass of our populace be deterred from speaking out. But I understand why people are fearful. So I'm doing all right.
It's interesting that you say that. I was bringing the dogs back from a walk this morning, and my neighbor, and I said, "Hey, do you have HBO?" Because I was going to tell her about the film Critical Incident.
Yeah.
And she goes, "I do." And I said, "Oh, my that documentary I was telling you about is out." And she goes, "Oh, I have seen it." And that was it. And
Yeah.
I just said, "Oh, okay. Well, what did you think of it?" She goes, "It was weird to see the backyard because I know the backyard and everything, and so it was just kind of weird, and that was all that there was to it." And so I just went, "Okay." And yeah, some people just don't even know how to. My mother-in-law is like that. She will not read my book. She threw it on the floor. She doesn't want to hear about anything I'm doing and this and that because I'm talking bad about the government, she says. And so, yeah. Yeah,
You know,
I get it. I
I
understand.
do. I mean, I get it too. And I think the stuff that you and I discuss and read and write about
Mm,
can be traumatizing to people. They don't want to get negative information.
yeah.
And for the most part, a lot of what we do talk about is negative, unfortunately, by nature of, the subject matter. But on the flip side, when we look back at our time on this earth, you and I and a handful of others will be able to say, hey, we were the ones who spoke up. And whatever history ends up showing, whether it's going to be something where we're able to help change the course of that and make a difference,
Yeah.
great. If not, at least we put up a good fight, and the next generation's going to have to jump in and do what they can do.
Yeah. That's it. I kind of see it as I think somebody had once told me that it was a Palestinian saying. There's something to the effect of, like we don't expect to see change in our lifetimes, but we do it for the generations after us and so forth. So,
Yeah, and hopefully people can learn, and that's kind of the main theme of the book I wrote, which is learning from our past,
say the
and
title of the book again because it's so
you,
long.
you think I can remember the title of my own book?
It's on
It's
Amazon, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is supported by Jeff
Yeah, I
Bezos.
know. It's
um,
okay.
the Last Survivor: Lessons from the Past and the Dying Dream of Freedom.
There you go.
I think it's a cool title. It's just,
It is
a
a cool
bit
title.
wordy.
Yeah, it's a little bit wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But anyway, so hey, by the way, I just wanted to let you know the whole Nancy Guthrie case
yeah.
is like they're doing a whole investigation, and it's all going up the way that you were staying the last time you were in Tucson. Like apparently, her trip, the way home from dinner that night went right by
Yeah.
the Hampton Inn and all this stuff. It's crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like,
Wow. I saw Art Del Crapo out there, former
he
Border
was,
Patrol agent, former
picking
vice
through the
president.
desert. It's
He's out
interesting
there like
this.
looking around. I'm like, dude, you haven't sign cut in 20 years. Shut
Yeah,
up.
what's he gonna find out there? And also, like, the amount of people that are using this to, like, have some
Promote.
sort of, look at us political,
Yeah,
you know,
he even got on, I think he was on Fox News or something the other day. Yeah, I went out there to look around. I'm like, God, you're so gross. You're just so fucking gross.
it
Nothing
is.
changes.
Nothing does. It's always the same stuff.
Well, at least it gives us something to fight for, I guess. But yeah,
I
his real name is Art Del Cueto. I like to call him Art Del Crapo. So, at any rate, he's
I have a
all
new nickname, by
shell.
the way, for Homan.
Oh, yeah.
We call people gas bags. I
Uh-huh.
call him cash bag.
Oh, I like that. I like
He's a
that a
cash
lot.
bag. He likes bags of cash. Um,
Yeah.